Sometimes the ones who save us aren't people. They're souls wrapped in fur, carrying the light we've forgotten. After losing his wife in a fire and watching his daughter go blind, Ethan Hale believed his life had ended. But when a silent husky named Balto entered their world, the truth buried beneath the ashes began to rise again. A story of pain, redemption, and a love that sees beyond sight. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if you believe that love can heal even the deepest wounds, hit that subscribe button and stay with us till the end of this heartbreaking story. The snowstorm had buried Everpine beneath a blanket of silence so deep that even the wind seemed afraid to disturb it. The world outside shimmered under the dim orange glow of frozen streetlights. Houses stood like ghosts, their rooftops bowed under the weight of winter. Somewhere on the edge of town, where the mountains loomed like sleeping giants, stood the Everpine Animal Rescue Center, a small, weather-beaten building with frost crawling up its windows and a single flickering sign that read, "Adopt, Heal, Hope." Inside, the smell of disinfectant and damp fur hung in the air. Rows of kennels stretched down a narrow corridor, each holding a pair of eyes watching, waiting, pleading. Barking echoed unevenly, bouncing off the tiled walls and fading into the far corners, like lost prayers. But at the very end of the hallway beyond the light, there was one kennel that remained still. No barking, no movement. Only the faint sound of breathing, low and uneven, like the last embers of a dying fire. Officer Ethan Hale, 38 years old, stood just inside the doorway, his boots leaving trails of melting snow across the linoleum. His face was carved from the same stone as the mountains outside, hard, quiet, and weathered by too many winters. The faint scent of smoke seemed to follow him everywhere, though the fire that had burned his world to ash had been extinguished months ago. Beside him, his 10-year-old daughter, Mia, held tightly to his hand. Her pale blue eyes were unfocused, cloudy with the gray film of blindness. She moved carefully, each step deliberate, her white cane tapping softly against the floor. Her small fingers clutched his sleeve with quiet strength, the only anchor she had in the darkness that had swallowed her since that night. The shelter's manager, Marjorie Quinn, an older woman with deep creases around her kind eyes, greeted them with a gentle smile. "Mr. Hale," she said softly, "you made it through the storm. Most folks cancel when the weather turns." Ethan's voice was low, steady. "My daughter's been asking for weeks." Mia turned her head toward the woman's voice. "Hi, Miss Quinn," she said politely. Marjorie's heart softened. "Hello, sweetheart. I heard you're looking for a friend." Mia nodded, smiling faintly. "Daddy says dogs don't mind if you can't see them. They just know if you're kind." Marjorie's eyes flickered with emotion. "That's true, dear. Dogs don't care about what we've lost, only about what we still give." They began down the corridor. As they passed each kennel, Marjorie told them stories about an old retriever named Samson who'd been rescued from a frozen river, a terrier who'd been tied to a truck in the cold, and a timid collie learning to wag her tail again. Mia listened intently, tilting her head toward every bark and shuffle, whispering little hellos under her breath. Ethan watched her with a mix of love and pain. She hadn't smiled like this since the night of the fire, the night the world had gone red and black, and she'd screamed his name through the smoke. When they reached the last row, the barking faded. The corridor grew colder, quieter, and the light overhead flickered. Mia stopped walking. Her cane tapped once against the floor, then went still. "Why does it sound empty here?" she asked. Marjorie hesitated. Her breath misted in the cold air. "It's not empty, sweetheart," she said quietly. "That kennel belongs to Balto." Mia's brow furrowed. "Balto? A husky," Marjorie said. "Found near the ruins of a burned cabin outside town 2 months ago. We think he was a rescue dog, but there were no tags, no chip. When the firefighters found him, he was lying beside a man's body. Wouldn't move, wouldn't eat. He nearly froze there." Ethan's chest tightened. "A burned cabin?" he asked, his voice suddenly rough. Marjorie nodded. "Off Ridgeway Road, north side of town. The fire that took those volunteer firefighters. You might remember it." Ethan froze. He remembered. He would never forget. That blaze had devoured his unit, Unit 14, his own men, his wife, his home. Marjorie didn't notice the color draining from his face. She continued softly. He hasn't made a sound since. No barking, no howling, just silence. Mia tilted her head. Can I meet him? Mia, Ethan began, his voice low, warning. But his daughter had already stepped forward. Her cane brushed the floor ahead of her until it touched something solid. Cold metal. The kennel door. Inside, under the dim light, the husky lay curled in the shadows. His fur was a mix of ash gray and white, marred by scars that traced across his flank and muzzle. One ear was torn, the other twitching faintly. His eyes, pale ice blue, were open but distant, staring at nothing, yet haunted by everything. Hey, boy, Mia whispered softly. You don't have to hide, I'm here. Ethan's pulse quickened. Sweetheart, stay back, he warned, stepping closer. But Balto moved before he could stop her. Slowly, painfully, the dog lifted his head. For the first time in weeks, he shifted his weight and rose to his feet. His nails scraped the floor. His breath came out in a low, uneven huff, fogging the air between them. Mia smiled faintly, sensing movement. You're not afraid, are you? The husky's ears flicked at her voice. Marjorie's hand flew to her mouth. He's listening, she whispered. Ethan felt something twist inside him. Recognition, maybe, or dread. Those eyes, that scar on the dog's shoulder. He'd seen them before in the flames, when one of his men had screamed for help and the world had gone white with heat. Mia crouched, reaching out slowly until her fingertips brushed the steel bars. It's okay, she said, her voice trembling. You're safe now. The dog hesitated. Then, inch by inch, he stepped closer until his cold nose touched her fingers. The moment hung in the air, silent, sacred. Balto pressed his head gently against her hand. Mia gasped softly, startled but smiling. He's warm, she whispered. He feels sad. Ethan couldn't breathe. Marjorie's eyes glistened. He hasn't done that with anyone, she said. Not once. Mia turned her face toward her father. Daddy, can we take him home? Ethan's throat tightened. Sweetheart, he's been through a lot. He might not. He needs us, Mia said firmly. Just like we need him. The conviction in her voice silenced him. For months he had lived only in guilt, drowning in what he'd lost. But now, watching his blind daughter touch the scarred husky who had survived the same fire that destroyed their lives, he felt something stir, a spark beneath the ashes. Marjorie cleared her throat softly. I can start the paperwork if you're sure. Ethan stared at the dog, whose icy gaze met his own through the bars. There was something in that look, something that felt like judgment or forgiveness or both. He nodded slowly. We'll take him. As the storm howled outside, the husky lay his head once more in Mia's lap through the cage door. His tail twitched faintly, like a heartbeat waking after a long sleep. And for the first time in a long time, the Hale family, shattered, grieving, broken, felt the faintest breath of warmth return. But as they left the shelter, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that fate hadn't brought Balto to them for comfort. It had brought him as a reminder. Some wounds, he thought, as he looked at the scarred husky walking beside his blind daughter, never really heal. They just learn how to breathe again. Outside, the wind carried the sound of distant sirens through the mountains, faint, hollow, echoing from somewhere in the north. And as the snow began to fall harder, Balto stopped suddenly on the path, turned his head toward the sound, and growled, low, deep, and ancient, as if the past itself had called his name. The wind outside the Hale house keened like a voice from the mountains. Everpine lay buried in snow again, the kind that made the world look clean but feel haunted. Through the frosted windows, light from the fireplace flickered across the wooden walls, painting everything in a restless orange glow. Balto lay on the rug near the hearth, his silver-gray coat catching the warmth. But his sleep was anything but peaceful. His paws twitched, his breath came in ragged bursts. Then the sound came, a low, muffled whimper, deep from the gut, as if he were trapped inside a dream that refused to let him go. Mia sat cross-legged nearby, listening to him. He's dreaming again, Daddy, she said softly. He sounds scared. Ethan looked up from the kitchen table where he'd been pretending to read a report. The pages lay untouched, his mind miles away. He studied the dog for a long moment. Every few seconds, Balto's muscles jerked. His lips pulled back slightly, showing a flash of teeth. "He's remembering," Ethan murmured. "Remembering what?" He hesitated. "Something from before." Mia tilted her head, hearing the change in his voice. "Like you do." The question hit harder than she knew. Ethan closed the folder, staring into the fire. The flames swayed and cracked. And for a moment he saw it again. The night of the fire. The way it ate through everything he loved. The red light flashing against the windows. His own hands shaking as he pulled Mia from the wreckage, while Claire screamed his name from inside. Balto let out a sharp bark in his sleep and jerked awake, panting. His eyes darted wildly until they found Mia. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing his fur. "It's okay, boy," she whispered. "You're home." Balto's breathing slowed. He pressed his nose against her wrist and let out a low sigh that sounded almost human. Ethan watched them, the blind girl and the broken Husky bound by something he couldn't explain. It should have been comforting. Instead, it scared him. That night, long after Mia had gone to bed, Ethan sat alone by the fire. The house was silent except for the ticking of the clock and the occasional groan of ice shifting on the roof. Balto lay nearby, awake now, staring into the flames. "Why her?" Ethan muttered under his breath. "Why you?" The dog didn't move, but his ears flicked. Ethan rubbed his face, exhaustion crawling under his skin. He'd noticed something earlier that day when he brushed Balto an old tag stitched inside the leather collar, barely visible under the worn fabric. He'd pried it loose after Mia had gone upstairs. Now it sat on the table before him, a small brass rectangle with a single engraving. Unit 14, Rescue Division. Hale. The world seemed to stop. His name, his team. He turned the tag over with trembling fingers. The back bore another marking, a deep scratch like a signature, almost erased by heat. For Ethan! He felt his throat tighten. This wasn't coincidence. Balto hadn't just survived the same fire, he'd come from it. He stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. Balto's head lifted, eyes tracking his every move. "Where did you come from?" Ethan whispered, stepping closer. Balto didn't flinch. He just stared up at him, eyes cold and endless as ice. The flames popped in the fireplace. Somewhere outside, a branch cracked under the weight of snow. Ethan sank to his knees, gripping the dog's collar again. "You were there, weren't you?" he said hoarsely. "You saw her. You saw Claire." Balto gave no sound, but his ears flattened, and his body tensed. For a heartbeat, Ethan thought he saw reflection move inside the dog's eyes. The flicker of firelight, a shadow of a woman's silhouette screaming from behind glass. He pulled back, breath trembling. From upstairs came the sound of soft footsteps. "Daddy," Mia's voice floated down. "Are you okay?" He swallowed hard. "Go back to bed, sweetheart." But she didn't. She came halfway down the stairs, her small hand tracing the banister. "The fire woke you up too?" Ethan blinked. "What fire?" She frowned slightly. "Smelled smoke." There was none, only the faint scent of burned wood from the hearth. "You're imagining things," he said too quickly. But even as he said it, Balto rose and moved toward the window, nose pressed against the glass. He let out a low growl, one so deep it vibrated through the floorboards. Ethan joined him, looking outside. Snow whirled through the dark, the world still and empty, until he noticed a thin line of light far off on the ridge. Orange, flickering. His blood ran cold. "Stay here," he told Mia, grabbing his coat. "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Nothing, just stay with Balto." He was out the door before she could argue. The cold hit him like a blade, the snow blinding under the beam of his flashlight. The ridge lay half a mile away, up a narrow trail through the trees. As he climbed, the smell of smoke grew stronger. When he reached the top, the old lumber depot loomed before him, abandoned since the fire last year. Now its lower floor glowed faintly with flame. Someone had said it again. Ethan grabbed his radio. "This is Hale. Fire at Ridgeway Depot. Request immediate response." Static. No answer. He turned toward the tracks leading away from the site and froze. Footprints in the snow. Fresh ones. Not just one set, two. He followed them with his flashlight until they disappeared near the tree line. Then something caught the light metal glinting half buried in the snow. He crouched and lifted it. A lighter. Silver. The initials CR engraved on the side. He knew those initials. Caleb Ross, one of his old team members. The man who died, or who was supposed to have died in the fire that destroyed Unit 14. His heartbeat thundered. He looked back toward the depot. The flames were dying, as though whoever started them had known exactly how to control the burn, just enough to be seen, not enough to spread. A message. When he returned home, Mia was asleep on the couch, her cane beside her hand. Balto lay at her feet, eyes open, ears alert. The dog turned his head as Ethan entered, as if reading his thoughts. "You knew," Ethan whispered. "Didn't you?" Balto's gaze didn't waver. Ethan knelt, brushing snow from his jacket. "You were part of that night. You remember more than I do." The dog's tail twitched once, but there was no comfort in the movement, only recognition. He reached out, running a hand through the Husky's fur. Beneath the thick coat, he felt another scar, long and rough, running down the dog's side. Burned tissue. Ethan sat back hard, closing his eyes. The past he'd buried under guilt and whiskey was clawing its way back through the ice. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Mia's small voice drifted down the stairwell. "Daddy," she murmured. "The fire's not done yet, is it?" He looked up slowly, his heart twisting. "No," he said quietly. "It's not." Outside, the snow began to fall heavier, blanketing the streets, the rooftops, and the lingering smoke from the ridge. But through that silence came another sound. Faint, rhythmic, metallic. Someone was walking through the woods near their property. Balto rose instantly, his fur bristling, growl rumbling low in his throat. Ethan reached for his flashlight again, his voice a whisper barely audible. "Easy, boy. We're not alone." Through the window he caught it, just for a moment, a figure in the snow, standing beneath the trees, watching the house. Then gone. Balto snarled, pressing his body between Mia's sleeping form and the door. And as the fire in the hearth burned lower, the room filled with the echo of Ethan's own voice in his head, a memory he couldn't silence. "You left them to burn." The storm returned without warning, thick, violent, and relentless. By dusk, Everpine was drowning under snow again, the sky an ocean of ash and light. The Hale house, standing alone at the edge of the forest, looked smaller that night, almost swallowed by the dark. Inside, the fire had burned down to coals. Shadows flickered along the walls like ghosts pacing behind the flame. Mia sat near the window, her hands resting on Balto's neck. The Husky's breathing was steady, but his eyes never stopped moving. He stared into the window's reflection, as if something behind the glass was calling to him. Every now and then, his ears twitched, his body tense, ready. "Daddy," Mia whispered, "it feels strange tonight. The air's heavy." Ethan looked up from his desk, where he'd been sorting through old photos he hadn't touched in months. Images of Unit 14, smiling faces in red helmets. His wife, Claire, standing beside him in front of the fire truck. And in the corner of one photograph, Balto. Younger, proud, wearing his rescue harness with the same calm authority he carried now. He couldn't breathe. He flipped the photo over, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. "It's just the weather," he said, though his voice cracked. Mia frowned. "No, it's something else. Balto hears it too." The dog let out a low growl, deep and unbroken. He rose, padding toward the door, his nails clicking against the wooden floor. Ethan followed, a heaviness forming in his chest. He checked the lock, the windows, every latch. Everything was shut tight, yet the unease persisted, crawling through the walls like static. Outside, the forest creaked under the weight of snow. And then through the blizzard came a sound that didn't belong to nature. A single sharp crack, followed by the faint smell of smoke. Not wood smoke, something acrid, chemical. Ethan's instincts snapped awake. He grabbed his coat and flashlight. "Stay here, sweetheart. Don't move from this spot." "Where are you going?" "Just checking something. Keep Balto close." He stepped into the storm, the cold slicing through him. The wind howled in his ears as he made his way around the house, scanning the tree line. The beam of light cut through the darkness, and there it was. A flicker of orange deep in the woods, no bigger than a campfire. Not again. He trudged forward, snow up to his knees. As he drew closer, the light took shape, a small flame burning in a metal barrel. And beside it, something worse. Footprints circling it, fresh and deliberate. "Who's out here?" he shouted. The wind swallowed his words. The barrel tipped suddenly, spilling its burning contents, gasoline-soaked rags, into the snow. The flames hissed, spreading for a second before dying under the cold. A warning, not an accident. A shadow moved behind the trees. Ethan swung the flashlight. The beam caught a figure for half a heartbeat, a man in a charred black coat, face half hidden by a scarf. Then he was gone. Ethan's pulse thundered. "Hey!" he barked, charging forward, but the snow was too thick. When he reached the trees, the man had vanished, leaving only a set of boot prints leading back toward the road. He picked something up where the fire had been, a torn scrap of leather. Embossed on it were the same initials he'd seen on the lighter. CR. Caleb Ross, he muttered, the name bitter on his tongue. Back at the house, the lights flickered once, twice, then went out. Inside, Mia sat up sharply. "Daddy?" The silence that followed was thick and total. The fire was dying, and in that stillness, she could hear only Balto's low, protective growl. The back door creaked open. "Daddy?" she whispered again, her voice shaking. Balto's head snapped toward the sound. He barked once, a deep, thunderous sound that rattled the walls and lunged toward the kitchen. From the doorway came a man's voice, rough and unfamiliar. "Well, I'll be damned. The famous hero still lives here." Mia froze. The voice was close now, dragging its words like smoke. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man stepped closer, his boots crunching on the floor. "Just an old friend of your daddy's. You must be Mia." Balto growled louder, positioning himself between her and the intruder. The man laughed. "Easy, mutt. I've dealt with your kind before." He raised his arm, metal glinting, a gun, small but steady. "Call your father." Mia shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "He's not here." "Then I guess you'll do." The gun cocked, and then the world erupted. Balto lunged with a roar that wasn't just canine, it was primal. The sound of loyalty turned into fury. The gun went off, the shot deafened by thunder. The bullet grazed the wall as Balto's weight slammed into the man, teeth sinking into his forearm. He screamed, slamming the butt of the weapon into the dog's skull. Balto staggered, but didn't let go. Blood sprayed across the floor. Mia screamed. "Balto!" "Shut up!" the man snarled, backhanding her across the face. She fell against the chair, her hand groping blindly for anything, until her fingers brushed metal. The poker from the fireplace. She gripped it tight. The man kicked Balto hard, tearing his arm free. The husky hit the floor, bleeding from his ear, but still tried to stand. "You should have burned with them," the man hissed. "You and your damn father." He raised the gun again. But before he could fire, the poker struck his wrist. The shot went wild, shattering the lamp instead of the girl. Balto was on him again, jaws locking around his throat this time. The man crashed backward, the gun clattering away. His scream was choked, wet and short. Then stillness. Mia was sobbing, shaking, her hands pressed to the floor. "Balto!" The dog staggered toward her, panting, his fur dark with blood, his and the intruder's. He pressed his head against her chest, trembling. "Hold on," she whispered. "Daddy's coming." Outside, through the storm, headlights broke the darkness. Ethan burst through the door seconds later, weapon drawn. His flashlight swept across the room, blood on the walls, the floor, the fallen man, and his daughter kneeling beside the dog. "Jesus," he whispered, dropping the gun. "Mia." She turned toward his voice. "He tried to kill me, Daddy." Balto stopped him. Ethan knelt beside her, cradling her shoulders. His eyes went to the man on the floor, his throat torn open, face half hidden by the scarf. But when Ethan pulled it away, he froze. Caleb Ross, not a ghost, not a memory. Flesh and blood. The man who was supposed to have died in the fire, and now his lifeless body lay in Ethan's living room. Balto whimpered, collapsing. His breathing was shallow, his eyes half closed. No, 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 Ethan whispered, tearing open his jacket for pressure bandages. Stay with me, boy. Mia reached out, her small hands trembling as they found Balto's fur. He's cold, Daddy. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time in years, tears filled his eyes. He saved you. He saved both of us. The sirens came minutes later, wailing through the snow. As paramedics covered the body and treated the dog, Ethan stood in the doorway, staring out at the forest where the flames once rose. The truth was finally clear now. Caleb had set the fires, one after another, to punish the man he blamed for leaving him behind. But fate had sent something else after him too, a witness made of loyalty and scars. Balto. Hours later, in the back of the vet's truck, Ethan sat beside the Husky as they drove through the storm. Mia held Balto's paw in her lap, whispering softly, "You're my light, boy. Please don't go out." Ethan looked at her, then at the dying embers of the town's lights behind them. His heart ached with a truth he could no longer deny. The fire that had once taken everything from him was gone, but another now burned inside him, gentler, sacred, the kind that didn't destroy. It was the fire of love, of faith, of something reborn through fur and blood and courage. He rested his hand on Balto's side, whispering into the cold air, "You didn't just save her. You saved me too." The truck disappeared into the snow, its taillights fading like embers swallowed by night. Spring came slowly to Everpine that year, as if the land itself hesitated to believe that warmth could still exist. The snow that had blanketed the town for months melted in quiet retreat, leaving behind rivers of light flowing through the streets and valleys. The mountains that once stood like gray tombstones now glimmered with the green promise of rebirth. At the edge of town, the Hale house still bore the scars of winter: charred wood near the back door, new glass where the window had shattered, and a faint scent of smoke that no scrubbing could erase. But inside, the air was alive again, with music, with laughter, with something like peace. Mia sat by the piano every morning now, the same piano her mother once played. Her fingers, still uncertain at times, moved softly across the keys, tracing melodies she heard in her dreams. Some were slow and broken, others bright and fragile. All of them carried the same quiet hope, the sound of someone finding their way out of the dark. By her side, as always, lay Balto. The Husky's coat had regained its full luster, the silvery fur rippling under the sunlight that poured through the windows. His wounds had healed, leaving only faint scars that looked like pale rivers across his flank. His left ear was still torn, but his eyes burned clear again, blue and steady, like glacial water. Dr. Karen Mills, the town veterinarian, had called his recovery a miracle. "He shouldn't have survived," she'd said, shaking her head, "but sometimes willpower does what medicine can't." Ethan had simply nodded. He knew it wasn't just willpower. It was love Mia's love, fierce and unwavering. Now, months later, their lives had settled into something new. Not the life they'd had before, the one with laughter in every corner and Claire's voice in every room, but something quieter, simpler, honest. Ethan spent his mornings working maintenance for the town fire department. He no longer took calls or led rescue missions. That part of his life had burned away with the old station, but he stayed close enough to remember why it mattered. Every night when he came home, he'd find Mia and Balto waiting on the porch, listening for his boots crunching in the gravel. And every night, he'd whisper the same words when he saw them: "Still my heroes." One evening, after a long day of patching the roof of the town's new firehouse, Ethan came home to find the porch empty. Panic flared in his chest. "Mia!" he called out, scanning the yard. "Out here, Daddy!" The voice came from the back field. He followed it, his boots sinking into damp earth until he saw them. Mia sitting cross-legged in the grass beside a small stone marker. Balto lay beside her, head on his paws. The stone was simple, carved by hand. Caleb Ross, Unit 14, lost to fire, found by forgiveness. Ethan stopped a few feet away, his breath catching. "You made this?" he asked quietly. Mia nodded. "Mrs. Quinn helped me with the letters. She said everyone deserves a place to rest. He swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. You're right. Mia traced her fingers over the letters. He was angry, wasn't he? Yes, Ethan said. He thought I abandoned him. I didn't, but he believed it. She tilted her head, and Balto remembered him. Ethan looked at the husky. The dog's ears twitched, his gaze distant but calm. Yes, dogs remember what we try to forget. They stood there in silence, the kind that didn't hurt anymore. The wind rustled the grass, carrying the faint scent of pine and thawing earth. Somewhere far off, a church bell rang 6 times. Daddy, Mia said after a moment, when I was in the clinic after that night, I dreamed of Mommy. Ethan's breath trembled. You did? She was standing in a field. There was snow everywhere, but she wasn't cold. She was holding Balto's leash, smiling at me. She said she wasn't mad at you anymore. Ethan's vision blurred. Sweetheart, she said you kept your promise. Mia's voice softened. You saved me. He knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. No, he whispered. You saved me. Balto lifted his head, tail brushing the ground, watching them quietly. The setting sun painted the 3 of them in gold, wrapping them in light that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the world. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, writing in the worn leather journal he'd begun after the fire. The pages were filled with messy scrawls, fragments of thoughts, and half-finished prayers. He wrote, March 28th. I used to believe the fire took everything, but I see now it left behind what I needed most. A reason to keep going. Mia's laughter, Balto's eyes, the sound of life returning to a house that once only knew silence. I don't know if Claire can see us, but I think she would forgive me if she could. He closed the book gently. The sound of the piano drifted from the living room. Mia had woken up again, unable to sleep, and was playing softly. The melody was new, slow, mournful, but beautiful. Balto lay by her feet, watching her fingers move. When she finished, he lifted his head and gave a single quiet bark. She smiled. You like that one? He thumped his tail against the floor twice. She giggled. Then I'll call it Balto's song. Ethan leaned against the doorway, his heart full. That's perfect, he said. Spring turned to summer, and Everpine began to heal. The fires were gone. The fear had passed. The forest grew back thicker and greener than before. Sometimes Ethan still woke at night, hearing echoes of flames and screams. But now another sound followed, the steady rhythm of Mia's breathing, the soft sigh of the dog sleeping nearby. Those sounds meant life. They meant peace. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Ethan found Mia on the porch again. She sat quietly, head tilted toward the horizon, humming under her breath. What you hearin', sweetheart? He asked, stepping beside her. The light, she said simply. It hums when it's warm. Ethan smiled. You and your magic ears. She grinned, reaching out until her hand found his. No, Daddy, it's not my ears. It's here. She pressed her small palm against her chest. When you love something, you don't have to see it to know it's there. He looked out at the golden valley, tears gathering in his eyes. I think you're right. Balto stirred beside them, lifting his head as if agreeing. The breeze carried the scent of rain and wildflowers. For the first time in years, the air didn't smell like smoke. As twilight fell, Ethan wrapped his arm around his daughter's shoulders. You know, he said softly, I think your mom would have loved this view. Mia smiled. She sees it through us. He turned toward her, touched by the certainty in her voice. Through us. Through love, she said. That's what never dies. Ethan couldn't speak. He simply held her closer, the weight of her words settling deep into him. Above them, the first stars appeared, faint and trembling, like tiny promises scattered across the night. Inside, the fireplace flickered to life. Its glow danced on the walls, casting the faint shadow of a husky curled protectively beside a little girl's chair. Ethan opened his journal one last time that night and wrote, April 12th. She cannot see the light, but she has become it. Balto's scars remind me that pain can be proof of survival, not defeat. And when the wind moves through these mountains, I swear I can hear her laughter in it, the woman I lost, the daughter I almost lost, and the life that's still here. I don't need redemption anymore. I already found grace. He closed the book, laid it on the windowsill, and stepped outside. Mia had fallen asleep in the rocking chair, her head resting on Balto's side. The dog stirred but didn't move, his breath steady, a silent guardian under the stars. Ethan pulled the blanket over them both. The night was cool but not cold. Not anymore. He looked to the heavens where the aurora was beginning to unfurl, a river of green and gold flowing across the black sky. "Thank you," he whispered, "for the fire, for the snow, for the light that stayed." The wind carried his words upward, and in that moment, surrounded by the hum of night, the sleeping child, and the loyal dog who had walked through fire to bring them home, Ethan Hale finally understood that not all flames destroy. Some are sent to light the way. The porch light flickered once and steadied, its warm glow spilling into the dark. Father, daughter, and Husky, three souls rebuilt by love, wrapped in the quiet grace of a world reborn. And above them, Everpine exhaled into peace, the mountains whispering the only truth that mattered anymore. Love sees beyond sight.